John, on that executive order, we've got some pictures of this to show as well at the same time. This executive order that Donald Trump is signing against social media companies, can you elaborate? What does this actually mean?
Okay, this stems from a 2006 law, which basically permits Section 230 of a 1996 law, which shields social media companies from liability. In the United States, television stations, newspapers, magazines, other online news platforms are all subject to some of the same liability rules like slander and defamation. Social media companies are not, there's a special carve out for them. They get special treatment where they're treated much like bulletin boards, where they're not publishing material. So therefore, they're exempt from all this liability. And this is a big part of their business model for these social media companies. But now Twitter has gotten into the practice of putting fact checking on other parties' tweets, which is arguably publishing if they're criticizing or commenting or in any way on what people publish on these platforms, that makes them a publisher. So that to go further with this would require congressional action. But what they're about to find out, which is why Mark Zuckerberg threw Twitter under the bus today, because he's similarly situated, is that there's support for this type of action on the Democrat side of the aisle, including Joe Biden, who in January of this year said that social media companies should not be receiving this special treatment. So social media companies, Twitter may have opened up a can of worms here, which could end up posing a huge threat to the market capitalization of all of these companies.
Okay, well, still on Donald Trump, and as Tom Petrovsky just mentioned, there will be another press conference tomorrow from the US president where he's expected to respond to these actions from China overnight, where they're going to press ahead with these security laws in Hong Kong. What's the reaction expected to be?
It'll be strong, but measured somewhat. What Beijing has done here is a violation of the 1984 agreement between Great Britain and China with regard to one country, two systems. And it's a violation of Chinese law, arguably, in the sense that this measure was passed in Beijing, bypassing the Hong Kong legislature. What I think you're liable to see out of this is a modification of the special trade rules the United States has for Hong Kong. Hong Kong does not treat China, the United States does not treat Hong Kong the same way it treats China for a lot of trade purposes. Hong Kong gets a lot of special treatment. So I think you're going to see a rescission, a slight pullback in that, and possibly some increased sanctions towards individuals and entities in China. I do not think at this point, though, it will represent a wholesale ratcheting up of the trade war, although we could get there at some point down the road.
Okay. It does all seem worrying. Also, these pictures out of Minneapolis overnight that we're seeing this morning, John, I mean, there's shades of the LA riots and all of this, isn't there?
Yeah, I actually went to college in L.A. when the L.A. Rodney King riots were happening. I was going to school right in the middle of it. It is reminiscent of that. Fortunately, it hasn't spread to that level yet. Hopefully it won't, but it's not as bad as it was back in the early 90s. But it's as bad as it's ever been any time since then, especially since in this case, it's so egregious. I've numerous friends in law enforcement who are the law and order types. All of them, everybody is in absolute disgust at what these officers did. Nobody's trying to defend or mitigate this in any way. President Trump got out in front of it yesterday by saying this is going to be a priority for the U.S. Department of Justice to look into any civil rights violations of federal law. Minneapolis is now, at the president's direction, awash in federal agents and augmenting the U.S. Attorney's Office there to make sure that this kind of conduct is not repeated inside the Minneapolis Police Department.